The Sterling estate looked flawless that evening, but the perfection only made the tension sharper. In the glow of the chandelier, Isabella sat at the long mahogany table, her navy dress too modest for a room built to display wealth. She kept her hands folded, steady, even as Catherine Sterling's voice cut across the silverware. "Isabella, must you always look so small? Ethan deserves a wife who elevates him." Ethan didn't defend her. He didn't even look up, just tapped his screen, jaw tight with ambition. But when he finally spoke, the words drew every eye to the table. Helios rejected the deal again. Unbelievable. What kind of idiots run that company? Isabella felt the moment lock into place, as if the whole house were holding its breath. He still didn't know. None of them knew. Catherine leaned back, smirking. Some doors simply stay closed to people who don't belong. A spark flickered behind Isabella's calm expression. Quiet, dangerous, impossible to ignore. Tonight would be the last time they mistook silence for weakness. What happens when their nobody reveals she's the one holding all the power? Like the video and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales. The next twist hits harder than the first. The dining room's tension didn't fade overnight. It followed Isabella long after the plates were cleared and the lights dimmed, lingering like a bruise beneath the surface. Later that night, when she stepped into the quiet guest room that had always felt more like a storage space than a sanctuary, she finally allowed her breath to shake. She had endured years of condescension, shrinking herself to fit a life that never truly welcomed her. But Ethan's final remark about Helios replayed with a sharpness that refused to dull. Idiots. He had called them idiots. He had called her an idiot without realizing it. And for the first time in years she didn't feel hurt, she felt awake. The moment stayed with her the next morning as she packed a small bag and slipped out of the Sterling mansion before sunrise. The house slept without noticing her absence. Only the gardener, sweeping dew off the walkway, gave her a sympathetic nod. Isabella returned it quietly before getting into her aging sedan, the engine coughing like it shared her exhaustion. By the time she reached the city, her pulse had settled into something calm but fierce. The glass tower of Helios International reflected a sky shifting from gray to blue, the kind of sky that suggested a turning point even before the day began. As she walked into the lobby, security straightened instinctively, not out of intimidation but recognition. "Good morning, Ms. Rossi," one guard said softly. For a brief moment, Isabella let the name settle on her shoulders like a mantle she'd abandoned too long. Inside the executive elevator, her reflection stared back, tired but resolute. She smoothed her hair, squared her shoulders, and let an old strength she had smothered for years rise to the surface. When the doors opened onto the private floor, her assistant, Sebastian, waited with a tablet in hand and concern etched into his expression. "You're early," he said. "I needed clarity," she replied. "You left the estate." "Yes," Isabella said. "And I won't be returning as their guest." Sebastian studied her for a long second before nodding once. "Then Protocol Vega is ready for execution. Financial reports, acquisition drafts, the Apex evaluations, everything you requested." A flicker of gratitude warmed her chest. She had built this empire quietly, on her own terms, with people who respected her for her mind, not her surname or social pedigree. Inside the glass conference room, screens lit up with Apex's tangled financials, over-leveraged accounts, unpaid debts, exaggerated projections, and a dependence on a merger they assumed would be granted out of desperation. "They think we need them," Isabella murmured, scrolling. "Which is precisely why they made sloppy choices," Sebastian noted. A memory surfaced, Ethan bragging about power couple energy, as if ambition ran only through his veins. He never once asked about her aspirations. He never imagined she could be more than a shadow following his climb. But today he would learn. By noon, Isabella had informed the board of her personal involvement and authorized the silent purchase of Apex stock through a network of shell companies. The directors exchanged glances, some surprised, some entertained, but none questioned her. They knew the precision behind her moves, and they had seen her dismantle larger corporations with a single announcement. This will effectively place Helios in control within 72 hours, Arthur Pendleton, her lead counsel, confirmed. Good, Isabella replied. But I want him to see it happen. Ethan, Arthur asked. And Catherine, Isabella added. They'll attend the meeting they believe is their victory. And I intend for them to watch every assumption they've ever made collapse in real time. The room fell silent, not out of fear but out of admiration. There was something relentless yet dignified in the way Isabella operated. She didn't lash out, she didn't rage. She executed. 3 days later, the city buzzed with its usual rhythm, but inside Helios, an undercurrent of anticipation hummed. The boardroom had been meticulously prepared. Documents aligned, screens calibrated, security stationed discreetly in the hall. Isabella chose a white suit, sharp and commanding, paired with the Helios insignia glinting like a signature of authority. When Ethan and his entourage stepped off the private elevator, excitement radiated off him. He strutted through the hall as if he owned it, Jessica shadowing his side with a look of curated confidence. Richard Vane followed, wearing a suit that seemed chosen more for intimidation than professionalism. Morning, Ethan announced to the receptionist with an air of superiority. We're here to meet the CEO. The receptionist gave him a tight smile tinged with pity. They're expecting you. As he walked toward the boardroom, his comments echoed off the marble. We're about to change the city, Jess. This is what power looks like. Inside, Isabella stood with her back to the room, posture poised, gaze fixed on the skyline. She didn't turn when the doors opened. She didn't need to. The shift in the room's atmosphere said enough. When she finally faced them, Ethan's grin faltered. Isabella, he said, confusion knotting his words. Why are you? But she didn't give him room to finish. With slow precision, she took the seat at the head of the table, her seat. Jessica scoffed. Is this a joke? Richard narrowed his eyes. She's sitting in the CEO's chair. Because it's mine, Isabella said. Helios is mine. The words didn't land like an explosion. They landed like truth carved in stone. Screens behind her illuminated charts, signatures, transfers, evidence of the takeover. Ethan's breath hitched as the reality unfolded. Apex had already been overtaken. Every decision he believed he controlled had been absorbed by Isabella's strategy days before he even arrived. You married a ghost, Isabella said calmly. A ghost who built the empire you begged for access to. Ethan staggered. Bella, we can fix this. I didn't know. That's the problem, she replied. You never cared to know. When she signed the final document, transferring Apex's authority entirely to Helios, security stepped inside. Mr. Henderson, the Apex CEO, wilted into his chair, already aware of his termination. Jessica's mask cracked as she realized the relationship she was banking on held no leverage. And Ethan dropped to his knees. You can't fire me, he choked. I built everything for us. You built nothing for us, Isabella corrected. You built everything for yourself. His job was gone. His future was gone. The taste of superiority he had wielded so easily evaporated as reality consumed him. But Isabella wasn't finished. Later that afternoon, when she arrived at the Sterling estate flanked by her team, Catherine greeted her with practiced disdain. The disdain wavered as Isabella handed her the foreclosure papers. Catherine's face drained of color when she saw the forged signature. The debts, the consequences. You're taking my home, Catherine whispered, disbelieving. No, Isabella said. Your son did. The estate was no longer Sterling property. It belonged to Helios distressed assets, and Catherine had 45 minutes to vacate. Her shouts echoed helplessly as security catalogued paintings she once bragged about. Ethan arrived moments later, frantic, sweat-soaked, barely standing. Please, he begged. Don't do this. I have nothing left. Isabella stepped closer, her voice low but steady. You had a wife who loved you. You had opportunities. You had choices. And you used all of them to belittle the one person who stood beside you. She turned away as he reached for her, blocked by Sebastian. Where will we go? Catherine cried. We'll be on the street. There's a motel nearby, Isabella replied. You'll manage. The Rolls-Royce door opened for her, and she didn't look back. Not when Ethan collapsed to the gravel, not when Catherine screamed her name, not when the Sterling estate began its descent into silence. Inside the car, Isabella's phone buzzed with a message from Arthur. Apex restructuring approved. Former executives officially removed. Stock up 3%. She allowed herself a single breath of relief. Not joy, just release. She had reclaimed her life, her power, and her identity without shouting, without breaking, without mimicking the cruelty she had suffered. Yet the story was not finished. Not yet. Because someone else was about to pay a price they never saw coming. And that twist changes everything. By the time the Sterling estate faded from the rear window, the storm that had churned inside Isabella for years finally quieted. She didn't feel triumphant in the way Ethan once imagined success tasted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't glittering. It was steadier, like a door she'd held shut for too long had finally opened, letting in air she hadn't realized she was missing. In the days that followed, she returned to Helios not as someone hiding a life, but as a woman choosing one. Her team noticed it first. The way she walked into meetings without shrinking, the ease in her voice when she made decisions, the calm certainty that came from no longer apologizing for her existence. For the first time, she wasn't surviving anyone's expectations. She was living her truth openly, and it changed everything. She didn't seek revenge for its own sake. What happened to Ethan and Catherine wasn't punishment. It was the cost of refusing to see the worth of someone who stood right in front of them. And maybe that was the lesson she'd carried without knowing. Truth doesn't need permission to rise. It only needs a moment when someone finally chooses to stop hiding. One evening, as city lights flickered across her penthouse windows, Isabella allowed herself a rare smile. Not for what she gained, but for what she finally let go. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Canada's Heartfelt Tales. Your support helps us bring more powerful stories to life.